Welcome to my podcast, Design for More. You can locate this episode on my socials. I'm your host, Angie, and today we have a special guest who's going to take us on a journey of growth, insight, and inspiration. Let's get started. Jyoti, welcome.
Thank you, Angie. Great, good to be here.
Thanks. We're so excited to have you here. Jyoti wears many hats, but today she will be speaking from her personal and professional experiences. She is a South Asian woman who moved from Surrey, BC to Ontario and currently resides in Ontario. She is a reputable realtor and a career coach and a good friend of mine for many years. So today we are talking about memoirs. The title of today's podcast is Every Woman Has a Story Worth Telling. So I will dive right in. Jyoti, welcome. And I know you are currently in the process of writing a memoir, super exciting. Both of us have been writing about our lives recently, and this is something we converse about, in terms of like giving each other feedback. But what has that writing process taught you about yourself that you didn't expect? Tell me more about that.
Thank you, Angie. That's such a good question because from the time I actually decided back in 2013 when I was going through a separation and then followed by a divorce that I will write about it one day. But as you can imagine, I was in my early 30s and I was very angry. So I wanted to wait until a point where it's not about the bitterness. And about a year and a half ago, when I did start writing it again and putting all those pieces together, I had these journals. I thought, this is going to be my book of how to survive a divorce. And I was doing it for somebody else. And in the process of writing it, I really realized it was truly just for myself, which I was not expecting. But what it's done is it's really helped me look at certain situations that happen as I wrote about them, look at them in a different light, look at my role in those situations, notice some patterns in my growth from that time to now, and even looking back before that. And it's really taught a lot about myself more than anything else. So, as much as I was doing it for somebody else, and even if I could help one other person, it's really helped me understand myself a little bit better and how I move forward in life.
And I think that's the most important point that you made. Like it's really helped you understand yourself and a lot of that growth. So would you say, like, as South Asian women, I know we've talked about this in other podcasts, many of us grew up believing that we should stay quiet, keep the peace, protect our family. So how do you think those messages affected you, and how did they impact your ability to tell your own story?
Yeah, and that's as much as I used to think that is very limited to our culture, our South Asian Punjabi culture. In the process of writing this book, I started doing some research on, like even other memoir authors or authors in general as they were writing it. I found, and especially for myself, is that our society around us is designed in a way that like people rely on our us being quiet about our truths and us hiding some of our truths and not sharing them more openly. And what I found is that every single time, even now, be it about real estate or my coaching or my journey, anytime I share something, I get so many people messaging me. By so many, I mean 10. I'm not a celebrity, but so many people from my life and outside of sort of my first point contacts messaging me and saying, "Thank you for sharing this. I thought I was alone in this." And that I think is the one thing that we need more and more of because we were taught to stay silent. We were taught a lot more to focus on shame and me saying I'm divorced. Even the word divorce carries so much shame within it. And so it's just one of those things where the more of us that tell our truth, and I'm not saying just women, men also, but the way majority of the society around us, regardless of South Asian or not, it's designed is that it relies on us staying silent, not sharing our stories. And that way, the next person that goes through it, they're questioning what is happening and they're hiding more of it and they're absorbing more of the shame. But the more we all talk about it, it makes it creates this room for all of us to share our stories and not feel alone. And it
Mhm.
also creates this room for more honesty, more compassion. I am confident that between at least your daughter and my daughter, the fact that we are very open about it and we're also sharing from a place of we've learned through this journey, it'll make them better human beings as they go into adulthood.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that makes a lot of sense. It's also very, like, I think what you're doing is very courageous, right? Like you said, like to be able to tell your own story and open up and not worry. Well, obviously there is worry about like what people's assumptions or judgments will be, but you're right. Like if we don't feel like we can express the truth, then how will you help others, right? Or like the next generation. So I think like what you're doing is amazing. Do you think that writing is a form of healing? And I know from my experience, I think I started writing about 3 years ago. I mean, before that, I always journaled a lot, but actually writing in terms of like with a program. And anyway, so over the past 3 years, as I write and as I add into the manuscript, I feel like it's it is a form of healing for me. And like you said, it was a lot of being able to reflect on growth and changes and patterns and things you want to be mindful of, but also want to change. So how has putting your experiences into words changed the way you see your past or even yourself today?
That is also such a good question. I can tell your background is therapy. Um, so one of the things, Angie, was that when I was after my divorce, when I was going through my therapy sessions, one of my therapists, it was my second one, and I mentioned why I had the second one in my memoir as well. Um, she actually recommended that I journal. Before getting married, I used to journal a lot. I had all these diaries that were filled with random notes. But after that, she said, about any situation that happens, especially because when I was going through it, when I'm here in Ontario, my family's out in BC. If something's happened in the evening, I needed to sort of let it outside of myself, but the act of putting it out on paper, it helped me kind of getting it to get it out of my head, if that makes sense. So as I was writing it, one, it was healing in the sense that I was no longer just like processing the same thought in my head because it felt so much bigger. Once I saw it on paper, I was able to process it a little bit better. Another was that it gave me, especially having written something, even if it was a week ago, if I've written something and I go back to it and I read it,
Mhm.
it gives you enough of that distance so you're able to look at it from a different lens. So there, that part of the healing came from it, but the joy also that comes from writing because you're creating something, and especially now with the intention of putting it into a memoir and putting it out there, it is also a form of art. So I think so there's multiple layers, and I actually want to know, like in your practice, is this something that you recommend? Maybe not to put it into a book, but some sort of journaling practices that you use with your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. We always, I mean, I personally always recommend journaling. Just one, because it helped me so much. But what I always tell my clients is like, because a lot of people will say like, I don't know how to journal or, I don't have the time. And that's totally fine. But like, start with something. So like you said, like that power you feel or that energetical release you feel when you put the words onto paper or even a laptop. Like you can even journal in your laptop if you're not like a person who wants to actually physically write, right? But it's absolutely something that is a form of healing. I think it's also, like you said, a form of creativity. A lot of people will say, I'm not a creative person. Everybody's creative. You just have to tap into it. So I think, for people who are wondering, like, how do I get into the habit of writing? Just start every day, something small, even one statement, even if it's one statement of gratitude, even if it's setting a daily intention for yourself. That's still a form of journaling. The point is, you want to make it a habit. You want to make it a consistent habit, right? So, definitely it is a form of getting out whatever it is that you've been holding on to, right? Because like you said, otherwise we have all these subconscious thoughts and patterns and beliefs that are just trapped in our mind. So if you don't have, like obviously if you have a professional to speak to or a friend or family member, that's great. But if you don't, journaling is like an ideal way of releasing some of that pressure or, whatever it is that you're going through, that stress.
No, I
Yeah.
completely agree. And I love what you mentioned about there's different ways to do this. And one of the ways in which I wrote as I was writing this book, much of it was initially started in Google Docs. But one of the things I thought was once I started, like about a year and a half ago, started writing, I would be, let's say, driving and I'd have an idea or I would remember something that I want to include. So obviously, often you can't stop and you can't find a book. So I would actually send myself a voice note. It's the voice memos app that I had on my iPhone.
Mhm.
And what it did was two things. One, it got out of my head. I knew it has a place that it's landed now, and I could always go back and take a look at it instead of that whole drive just worrying. And then two, especially on the iPhone, I'm sure the other phone apps also have that, is when I sent it to myself or when I recorded it, it also gave me a transcript. So it was easier to copy paste that into my Google Docs afterwards and then refine it. And then three, what it did was the therapy piece of it, as you were mentioning, was let's say if something's really bothering me, I would talk about, let's say, it's situation X that I've included in the memoir. I really want to process that. So it was almost like talking to myself out loud, but it types for me as well. And that allowed me to sort of just run it by myself a couple of times before making sure, deciding whether or not I want to include it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good tool, I think, to share with the audience is like what helps and what doesn't help, or what helped you. Because like you said, often a lot of women, especially, we're so busy, right? Work, kids, whatever else.
Yeah.
And if you're just thinking about something, and I actually went through this when I first started writing, where like same thing, I'd have an idea. I wish I had used the tool you did, because what I would do is I would say, okay, at the end of the day, I'm just going to make a note and add it into my journaling or into my notebook. And 50% of the time I would forget. Like I would not have the time, or I would just forget, and then that thought's gone. So I think that's a great idea, that, use something that's going to be realistic for you and your lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree.
So writing a memoir means revisiting parts of your life that aren't always easy. How emotional was this process for you?
Incredibly more emotional than I thought it would be. I'm close to 13, well, actually, oh, more than 13 years away from the actual experiences of what I went through. And even a year and a half ago when I started writing it, I thought, I've healed. I've always been in therapy since that year, and I'm in a very good place in my life. So I thought writing this will be very easy. Again, because I was writing it for somebody else when I initially started. But yes, there were a lot of tears and there were a lot of emotions. At times, surprisingly for me, actually, anger also came up. And at times that anger was for myself, like what were you thinking? Because as you do when you do, or if you do read my memoir, you'll see that, it wasn't a quick decision. As sometimes you see in the movie, something happened, you're done, you walk away. It took a while. So it took me some time to go from like anger slash disappointment for myself to move into that level of compassion that I needed to be able to complete this project. And again, with that, I needed to make sure that I continue with my therapy, because even writing this required another level of therapy, because I'm uncovering some of these things or some of these wounds that I may not have thought about in a long time. Another part was whenever it was something about my daughter or something that I remember thinking, oh my God, what am I putting her through? Or, what are we collectively putting her through? Those were very, very emotional for me, because I would remember her like 4-year-old face and all those situations. And then another one that I wasn't going to include initially was the time that my dad passed away. Like that was a very difficult time for me. And when I initially wrote the first draft, actually it was version 22 before I sent it out for other people to read it and give me feedback. Someone said, look, I remember you from that time. And I think that's something that's important in your journey from even 2022 is when he passed away to now in 2026, that consider, she didn't say include it, but she said consider including it if you think it makes sense. And I'm so glad they asked, because I was very hesitant touching that part of myself. But going back and revisiting, like that also healed what I felt about like suddenly losing my dad within like a span of 3, 4 weeks, and and how that connected to my overall story and my journey up until now. So yes, a lot of tears, some anger, a lot of disappointment initially, and then coming back to realizing that all of us, including my ex-husband, who's included in this, like there's some level of compassion for everybody that's involved in my journey that came as a result of it. So as difficult as it was at times, I'm still so very glad that I did it.
And I think that's such a powerful statement you made, that there's some level of compassion for every individual that was a part of your life or still is a part of your life, right? And yeah, it's just, I think it's something that a lot of people will benefit from. Like if you went through this and you kind of came out of it, having more compassion for people, for yourself even, but also, like you said, like that is essentially healing, right? So you're
Yeah.
able to look back as an observer and be like, okay, like that part of me was doing the best they could, but right now I'm also doing the best I can, right? And I think we have
Yeah.
to be very mindful of that. Like, although you're being compassionate towards all the others around you, like it's so important to give that compassion to yourself as well.
Yeah. And we forget that, especially as women, we have a ton of compassion in us, and but we're usually ourselves like we're the last ones to be on that list.
Yeah.
And this, especially when I was thinking about myself from that time and time leading up to it and the time following it,
Hmm.
as this person who hadn't like, I've grown so much in the last 13 years, partially because of, where I've been in life, partially because of the level of therapy that I've received since, and partially because of the conversations that I've had with others who've gone through similar experiences. And I still fear that there are so many, 32-year-old me's out there in the world, other people, but who are going through similar experiences that are very hard on themselves. And I really hope that, there is a way that we could go back and say, that, be easy on yourself, be kind to
Mm.
yourself, get the support that you need, ask for help when you can. But again, it's one of those things we could do one step at a time, and I'm hoping this book will serve as one of the tools.
I think it definitely will. I know I've read some of it and I think it's going to be amazing. It is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So many people say they've always wanted to write, including myself, but never start. Like I just know for me, it took a lot to get to that point of actually thinking about it and doing it. I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there who feel the same, right? Like they have all these ideas, or they're like, I want to share my story, but maybe they have a fear. So, what do you think is really holding people back, and how can they move past those fears, whatever the fears might be? Maybe it's judgment, maybe it's perfectionism, maybe it's not having time, maybe it's shame. Yeah, how do you think people can move past those fears, and what worked for you?
I think again, like I'll speak from my experience because depending on where you are in life, your fears might come from different things. But a lot, like you said, there's a lot of that judgment related concerns, the like trying to be a perfectionist. Often we're comparing our work, like our words, to somebody like, who's written multiple books. One of the writers that I read a lot and listened to a lot of our podcasts is Glennon Doyle. Like she's an amazing, amazing writer. And, every time I'd listen to something or read something of hers, I'd be like, there's no way I can write something like that. And it's true, I can't. Here's somebody who has training, who's been doing it for years and years. And, what I'm reading or what I'm absorbing is this curated final product of what they've put out. And I'm comparing it to my first draft. And it wasn't fair to myself because my sentences are not as even now they're not as beautiful as some of her work or most of her work. So that's another thing. Like we're being perfectionists that we're trying to compare it to somebody else. You mentioned time. That's a big thing. I have, a little bit of an ADHD issue with myself that I found either I would avoid writing for a while and I'd just focus on other things, or on the days that I sat down to write, it would be hours and hours because I don't have a typical 9 to 5. So it would be hours and hours. So it's just, that hyper focused time, which helped. But it's again, it's organizing your day in a way that, let's say if this is something that's important to you that you want to do, even if you dedicate, let's say 15 minutes,
Mhm.
even if it's a voice memo that you're sending to yourself while you're on a walk, walking your dog or what have you, just give it your time. Stop comparing it to anybody else's work. And then when it comes to shame, especially in I think in any community, but I know in the Punjabi community, that is a big thing where why are you putting this out there? In my case, I have certain situations in this that I'm not proud of when it comes to myself. So as much as, I'm giving the overall picture, I'm also sharing some of the pieces that like, people will raise their eyebrows when they read that. But I think I did that with the purpose of I didn't need to be perfect to be loved. Like that's one of the things where, as human beings, we deserve kindness, we deserve love, and obviously, as long as we're not hurting somebody, like there's some level of compassion that we deserve. And that shame associated with, oh my God, I can't believe you did this, and now you're putting it on paper, and if it's in a book, it's going to be there forever, and maybe your kids will read it or your mom will read it. Um, that's what's keeping a lot of people from living sort of the true lives that they're meant to live. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to share those mistakes because that will help you, me, somebody else seeing themselves in the work that you're producing. And then they can hopefully share. And we could all be, again, I'm coming back to the word compassion because that's one of the things that I've gained out of this process.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that makes a lot of sense. Like you said, like to be able to authentically tell your story, your truth, it will help one person or it might help 100. Like you don't know, but it will help someone, and that's what
Yeah.
matters, right? It's I think culturally and generationally we've been so silenced, right? Like especially South Asian women, your truth is never shared, nor respected or valued. And I know that's not the case for everyone, but it is a case for a lot of women. Like it's really about being able to freely express your voice and then I guess let go of that burden. It's a part of letting go, I think.
Yeah. And I, even to this day, there are times I teeter-totter and I go back to that, but we spend so much of our time worrying about what other people are going to think, but we don't pause enough to think about like how much time am I spending thinking about other people and their choices? I'm not. It's like rare that something will come up in my mind. I'll be like, oh, so and so did that. But we're so judgmental and questioning our own life and our journey and our way of living that we think other people are doing the same thing for us, but they're not. Like everybody has we're all so busy that no one has the time to think about anybody else, but we're still also still worried about it.
Yeah.
And I think our culture and our society makes that a little bit bigger because there is still that, look, what are people going to say? When I started writing, I did share with a couple of people in my family that I'm doing this, and there was a little bit of that. Well, like, are you going to use your real name? And I said that is a big part of why I'm writing because I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I didn't like I legally changed my my name twice, well, three
Mhm.
times including my birth name, but it's just one of those things where if we let go of that shame, we're again creating space. I read this somewhere actually about every time we pause and don't tell our story, we're actually taking permission away from somebody else who may want to share their story because they can't see you doing it, they're not going to do it. I think it
Yeah.
was Melissa Febos, don't quote me on that, but it's just that like we owe it to people around us. But at the same time, I'll also say like have somebody like yourself, have somebody, a therapist or someone that you're working with
Mhm.
that can help you decide, okay, what are you ready to share? I don't want to recommend that, anybody, if I was writing this back in 2013, 2014, I would be a mess because it was too close to the actual wound. There's this other saying about, write from the scar, not the wound. And that is so, so true. Like, wait until you've healed a little bit, have some distance if possible, and then work with somebody who can take care of your like psychological well-being as you go through this process because it can be challenging.
Yeah, and that's a great point that you're bringing up. Have, like you said, the right resources, the right support system in place. Because if you are going through a range of emotions, which, as you mentioned, anger, sadness, guilt, shame, happiness, even all those things, and you don't know where to put them. Yes, you can journal about it, but like you said, if you're still in the healing process, which many of us we go through for like your lifetime, right? Yeah, you definitely need someone. To help you through that process. And that is something really important, I think, that we should let everyone know is, it's not a bad thing to reach out for like therapy or for counseling or whatever support you need, right? Just have someone guide you and support you through this process because what you're doing is going to be really heavy, heavy work, but at the end you're going to feel amazing because you've let go of a lot of that negative energy or whatever it was that you're holding on to, that burden.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So for someone who's listening today that's never written before, going after your experiences of what you went through, where would you suggest they begin? And what are some simple tools, resources, or writing communities that can help them get started?
Some of the ones we've already, you and I have shared, which is, it could be a physical notebook. I have about three that I go alternate between, depending, because I had a specific thought in my mind about this memoir. But you could start as simple as, the dollar store sells the books. But I like, excuse me, I like fancy, pretty books. So I think like make it exciting for yourself. Like go to Indigo or Chapters or your local bookstore and find something that's pretty that gives you joy that you could write in. If you're doing the physical writing, get a nice pen. Or on, let's say if it's on your laptop, you could just start in Word. Like it doesn't need to be anything fancy. And then you could always transfer that. Like I used Readsy for now for to format my book, but start simple. You could also send I have a million messages that I've sent to myself. So it's just, just send yourself a voice note or a text message about an idea, but start so simple that's actually enjoyable. Like, do not look at, as I was saying before, like, don't look at somebody's finished product and compare your like first version to it because you're going to go through so many iterations and you'll get there. And start about something that makes you smile. I think starting from those places will get you in the habit of writing before you get into some of, if you have tougher areas to share. For example, like for me, one of the exercises that I did initially was like think about the house that I grew up in. And I had not thought about that house in so many years. And this is my house back in India. And it gave me so much joy. And I spent so much time on that chapter and I refined it. But think about that. Maybe it's a pet, maybe it's a sibling, whatever that may be, but something small that gives you joy. Tools I already mentioned. And I think Another one is, and I didn't realize that up until about 6 months ago, where I didn't look into that, is there are so many online and in-person communities that support this. There's the Writers Collective of Canada. Like you could find different timings where you go join them, and it's an hour and a half, and they give you prompts, and you're writing alongside other writers, and you
Mm.
share if you choose to, don't have to. But it's so, so helpful. So just search on Google or whichever system you use, but search up what's available to you, whether virtually or in person. Get involved, because when you're around like-minded people, then you're able to sort of carry on. Otherwise, when you get lonely in this, I know writer's job is it can get very lonely, but these communities help a lot as well, because you're seeing other people that are in a similar place in their journey versus comparing yourself to somebody who's an established author.
Yeah, thank you for those tips. I know when I started writing, and we've talked about this, I joined an actual writing program called the
Right.
Incubator, which was amazing, but it was costly. So do you have any ideas for people out there who want to start writing that's not going to be so costly, right? Like you're not committed to a program, but you can still get maybe some tips and tools from other authors or editors or things like that, or other containers that might be similar.
Yeah, yeah. I'll share mine, but I do want to hear about your program too, because I think that might be helpful for some people that are a little bit more further ahead in their journey. But for me, I mentioned Reedsy, so it's Reedsy. I'll send you the link after so you could share in the notes. It's a system that allows you, one, to write your book, but they have a ton of free resources, and I believe it's weekly or monthly that they'll have this live session with one of the experts that comes in, and then they talk through different processes. It could be character building. It could be about what is so. When I started writing, I didn't realize that there's actual formulas to how you write a story. Like, you can't just
Yeah.
have it can't just be, I was born and I did this and I did this. And like there needs to be some sort of a cadence to it. So there's a couple of different tools related to that. For example, there's the Save the Cat, but that's more for novels, but even for a memoir, it works. So search up on Google what's available. Readsy is one of them. They also have, so Readsy is kind of like, I don't know if you've heard about Fiverr. It's an app that allows you to connect with a lot of freelancers. So Readsy has a similar part to it as well, where and by the way, this is not sponsored by them. Maybe I should send it to them, but because that's where I found my editor as well. They have editors, they have illustrators, they have look all these other resources there, but you have groups that you can be a part of. Another one is called Memoir Nation. They have a podcast as well as there's a paid membership or there's an unpaid membership, and you get different layers of support. Again, it's a community of writers and Writers Collective of Canada. They are throughout Canada, and it's an amazing group that supports. And your local library, I promise you, will have some resources, some groups, and even on Facebook, there's so many groups. I didn't join that because for me, that was getting overwhelming. But yeah, these are just some of the resources, and I'll look up a few more and I'll share that with you so you could add that to the notes.
Thank you for sharing that. No, that's really helpful because I wasn't aware of Read Scene. It sounds amazing, so I'm definitely going to tap into that. But I think things like this, like these resources that you're sharing, are going to be very helpful for people who just want to start writing. And it doesn't have to be, like you said, to publish or anything. But what if you just want to get into the habit of writing? Or what if you've got so much going on that you need to start, like, unveiling and unburdening some of this stuff? So
The only
yeah,
other, sorry, I just cut
Mhm.
you off. The
No
only
worries.
other one I was going to add was Substack. So Substack it's kind of like your newsletter that you're putting out, but it's a place where initially just go on in and take a look at what other people are writing. Because
Okay.
what that helps you do is see the kinds of stuff, like there's like before getting on there, I didn't realize that you could pretty much write about anything, any size. Like it doesn't have to be a book, it doesn't even have to be an essay. It could be
Mhm.
50 lines about something that you're passionate about. Share
Okay.
that. That community is also very supportive. Um, but yeah, there's a ton available. But I do want to hear, Angie, about your experience with the group that you worked with, because
Mm.
I've read your draft and that's amazing as well.
Yeah, so I registered with the program called Incubator. So it's an actual writing program. It's based out of the States. It's 1 year, so it's very concise, I would say, for writing. So in that 1 year, you are really going to be writing your first draft, right? Which obviously you can take longer if you want, but that's the goal is that you're finished in 12 months. And I think I was finished in about 14 months. So the pro of that program is it's very organized. There's a structure. You follow a certain structure so that every month you're attending online courses with other authors, with other writers. They give you a lot of, like, pros in the program. So like you get editor reviews, you get reviews on how to write a synopsis. So a lot of just things that I guess normal people would do and learn if you are writing a book. It doesn't matter what type of book. It doesn't have to be a memoir. It could be fiction, nonfiction,
Yeah.
whatever you want. So I would say, yeah, if you're like for me, the reason I chose that program is because I really wanted to learn how to write. It's been a passion of mine since I was younger. I just never engaged in it. So for me, it was like a goal. It was on my bucket list. Like I want to know how to officially write. I want to know how to do it and go through this whole process. So I would say for somebody who's wanting to, at some point write and get something out on, maybe get it published or whatever, like that's a great program. Again, it is a little costly. So if you can tap into some of the free resources, that would be ideal as well. But yeah, it was amazing because for me, I'm a person who likes structure. I like to be organized, so for that reason, it was really great because every month you know what to look forward to. You know what you have to get in. You know how many words you have to write. So for that reason, it was great.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I love what you said about like you have to work with who you are and what your approach is to going through these kind of things. Because when, we're it's not a cookie cutter solution for anybody. So just looking at, okay, what is your need and what kind of supports are available and use the ones that fit for you. Because even the things that you and I have shared, maybe there's another approach to all of this. And, hopefully as you post,
Exactly.
other people can share their approaches as well.
And the other thing I want to mention is with that program, you do meet a lot of other writers and they're all over the world,
Right.
right? So you're, like you said, like you get to really learn a lot about other people's writing styles and techniques. They also offer like a manuscript swap, so you can swap with other writers
Oh, good.
and get feedback and, which is amazing. But it's interesting because like you really do learn that you're not alone. So like I remember reading a lot of other writers, like, whatever work they're working on and talking to them because you join groups with them. And I remember this one writer saying that she wrote her first version of her story 20 years ago, and she said it just sat there. And so when she
Wow.
joined this program, it really motivated her to do something with it. And she said, like otherwise that writing was just sitting there. So like it doesn't matter when you're ready to release whatever it is that you want to share with the world, but I think the goal is having it done, but also having the courage to write it and then knowing what to do with it, which is why these programs are really helpful, right? To help you
Yeah.
navigate.
Yeah, the accountability piece. And
Yes,
that's why, like coaching and counseling, that's another element of what we do in our works that sometimes when you're doing it all on your own, you may be able to gather all the resources and put it together, but until you have that accountability partner, it's difficult to move forward. If it's difficult to see progress when we're not seeing progress, then it's very easy to say, well, I'm not doing it at all.
yeah.
And the other thing I didn't mention, and I'm sure you'll offer the same, I'm putting you on the spot, but if somebody is listening and they're thinking about starting and they're like, okay, I just need like one more word of encouragement, I'm more than happy to connect with anybody that sees this, that is thinking about it, because this has given me so much joy, and I really think everybody should write something.
And I think anyone who does want to, like you said, ask those questions or reach out to you, they're gonna, I think they'll be really well supported. And I think you have so much wisdom to share. So yes, definitely. That's something that I think people will benefit from.
Thank you. And,
So
and same
yeah,
same goes with you.
yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think once you've been through the process, it gets easier to share and talk about the pros and cons. I think the another question that's really important to talk about, because I know it was something relevant for me and I know it's relevant for you as well. How do we balance telling our truth while also respecting the stories of the people who are a part of our lives or were a part of our lives?
Hmm. It can be difficult at times. I will be very honest that if you read my version one, as I mentioned, version 22 is when I decided to actually share with other people. But if you read the very first one, it would be so and so did this to me, and they did this, and then they did this, and this happened to me. It was all about things that, like, I was a victim in my little story that I was telling. And this is, going back to what we were saying before, once you've written and you go back and you take a look at it, okay, what role did I play, or what were other factors that were influencing what happened? So I think one is acknowledging that when you're sharing your story, especially if you decide to write a memoir, it is just your truth. That's why also it helps to write it, set it aside for at least a couple of weeks, come back to it and read it. Another important thing for me was going back to my why, I try to do that in all of the work that I do, like question myself on why is it that I'm choosing to spend my time on this? Because this isn't easy. Like this will, like both of us have said, like a year and a half of spending quite a bit of time on it and then writing
Yeah.
it. It's not an easy process. So why is it that I'm taking the time to put this much time and effort and, some financial resources into it? So connecting back with that, and I think most people, their why isn't to just throw somebody else under the bus or get revenge on someone that's done something to them. That usually isn't, and I hope it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in some cases it might be because that person wasn't held accountable. In my case, that wasn't the case. So just as you're writing, just look at why is it that you chose to include it. What does it mean in the overall context of the story? So there were a few things that I excluded because my story isn't meant to be, or my memoir isn't meant to be, this happened, this happened, this happened. It's meant to show, some changes in myself. Like I talk a lot about belonging in this memoir because I think that's one of the things that was impacting or influencing how I was behaving in pretty much any relationship that I've been in. And also looking at like being curious. And I found through this process and even in with some of the therapy that I'm like, as soon as
Mm-hmm.
you shift from being judgmental or judging even yourself or any situation and then become curious, okay, this happened. On the surface, it may look like this, but let's be curious about it. Like, what does it mean or what led to it? It really shifts our mindset.
Yeah.
And it is that part of it for me, especially, was so healing. And again, I think respect, like if I could write something that I can completely avoid hurting somebody else in that process, whether or not they're in my life right now or not, I will choose that path over including them and then putting them down because what is the point? Like this isn't about them. And
Yeah.
if it is still about them where you're feeling like you need to do something to hurt somebody else, that is another indicator that maybe you still need to work with a therapist or work with somebody that's a professional that could help you process that a little bit better before you put it and publish it, because the last thing you want to do is have something out there that then you want to recall, and in this day and age that doesn't work.
Yeah. And very great points, right? Like you said, like be very intentional about what you're putting out there and reminding yourself of what the reason is for it, right? And as you heal, like it'll get easier. The answers will get easier. So that, like you said, that why is very important. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah. And at any
Yeah.
point, I don't mean to say that if somebody did you harm and, like the Victoria Guffey story her memoir that came out, like if someone's done you so much harm and they haven't been held accountable, there is time and a place for some of those stories to come forward as they are. Like those people are not going to look good in that light.
Hmm.
But those are, I hope, I truly believe, like those are fewer than some of those more common stories where there's that connection between the rest of us where, it's like, so there's a time for saying respect the boundaries, be compassionate, but at the same time, respect does not mean that you always have to be silenced and you have to live in that. I can't say this because I'm not respecting. Maybe that person doesn't deserve the respect that you're trying to give.
Yeah.
So balance that out. Again, going back to your why, I think is what'll help.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
So as we come to an end, I just want to ask you, Jyoti, if our listeners take away one thing from today's conversation, what would you want them to remember about the power of writing?
There are so many, so many things. I think, especially because I've always been a reader, even as a kid, there were times that I remember reading this book, and I should look it up because as I was writing it, I was thinking about it. This is back in India. It was translated into Punjabi, but it was a book about a Russian soldier who is going through the mountains. I think his airplane had crashed. I should really go back and take a look at it. But he loses his feet, and it was just one of those stories that for a kid, I should not have probably been reading that. But it was about his struggle and how he comes out of it. Um, but it's every time you read something or every time you write or create something, you're creating a world for somebody else to get connected to. And especially when it comes to memoirs or sharing your stories, and even if instead of a memoir, you turn it into a novel or a story of that type, you're helping somebody else feel a little bit less alone. As I was going through this process, I listened to a lot of memoirists in their podcasts and read a lot of books. And what I found with that was as I would listen or as I would, I'm like, oh my God, like this is what I want to write about, or this is I feel so connected to. And there's certain books that help you feel so like they just help you feel less alone. Um, so think about that. And then the other thing is I am not writing, and I think many writers, we don't write to get famous unless you're already a celebrity, then maybe it is another source of income. But we're not writing to get famous or to make money. Likelihood of us making money on any of this is it's not realistic. But we're writing to build a connection between ourselves and at least one other human being. And if you could do
Mhm.
that, then I think the whole world will be a better place.
I agree. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom today. We really look forward to reading the final draft or, whenever you're ready to publish. I cannot wait to read the final copy, so that'll be very exciting. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Design for More. Please follow, like, subscribe, and support us. Remember, you weren't made to settle, you were made to rise. If you're ready to rewrite your story and step into the life you deserve, check out the link in the show notes, and I hope to see you again soon.